My name's Adrian, I'm 23, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the background child in my family. Not the black sheep, exactly, more like the invisible one. I was never the kid who caused trouble, but I also wasn't the kid my parents bragged about at dinner parties. That honor belonged to my older brother, Lucas. He's the golden boy, charismatic, athletic, the kind of person who could forget someone's birthday and still have them smiling by the end of the conversation. Me? I was the quiet one with my head buried in books, aiming for achievements that didn't photograph well for Facebook. Graduation day was supposed to be different. I'd worked for years to get here. Endless late nights, working part-time jobs, pulling double shifts to cover tuition gaps when scholarships didn't stretch far enough. I'd imagined that moment for years. The stage lights, my name being called, my family in the crowd cheering loud enough for me to hear them over the clapping. I even saved them the best seats in the auditorium. But that morning, I woke up to a text in the family group chat from my mom. "We won't be able to make it today. Something came up. We'll celebrate soon." I sat there staring at my phone for a good minute, thinking it was some kind of sick joke. I scrolled up to see if maybe they'd explained, but the next message came from Lucas. "We're heading to Aspen for the week. Totally last minute. Can't wait." Mom chimed in a minute later with a string of skiing emojis. No apology. No acknowledgement that my graduation, my college graduation, the first in our family, was happening in less than 4 hours. I didn't reply. I couldn't. My throat felt tight, and the walls of my apartment suddenly felt smaller. Part of me wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe they thought my ceremony was later in the week? But no, they knew the date. I'd been talking about it for months. I'd sent them the formal invitation from the university and even a reminder last week. They just chose something else. Chose him. When I got to campus, I tried to push it down and focus on the moment. Friends and classmates were there with their families, taking photos, holding flowers, laughing in clusters on the lawn. I smiled when people congratulated me, but the pit in my stomach kept growing. Every time I glanced toward the section where my family should have been, all I saw were strangers. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I'd remember the pride, not the empty chairs. Then my name was called. I walked across the stage, shook hands, smiled for the photo, and that's when I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. It was my dad. A text, "Come home immediately." No explanation. Just that. When I stepped off the stage, I saw the notifications piling up. Missed calls. 37 of them. The same message over and over. "Come home now." I didn't answer. Instead, I stared at the screen, my diploma in one hand, my phone in the other, wondering what could possibly be so urgent that the family, who skipped my graduation for a ski trip, now suddenly demanded I drop everything and rush home. And as I stood there in the middle of the crowd, the noise of celebration all around me, I felt something shift inside. A cold, quiet awareness that whatever was waiting for me at home wasn't just about something coming up. This was the start of something bigger. I didn't know it yet, but that day was going to draw a permanent line in my family's history, the before and the after, and I was about to find out just how deep the divide would go. When I finally got back to my apartment that evening, still in my graduation gown because I hadn't bothered to change, I found 3 more missed calls from my dad and 1 from my mom. No voicemail, no actual explanation, just more of the same 2 words, "Come home." I sat down at my tiny kitchen table, the one I'd bought secondhand when I moved out, and just stared at my phone. I hadn't heard from any of them during the ceremony itself. No congrats, no photo request, not even a text acknowledging it happened. Now they were treating me like I was late for an emergency I knew nothing about. An hour later, Mom's message finally came through. "Your brother needs you. It's important." No context. No question about whether I was okay or how the ceremony went. Just straight to Lucas. I could almost hear the tone behind it, the same one I'd grown up with. In our house, Lucas's problems were family problems. Mine were mine. If Lucas scraped his knee, the world stopped until he got a bandage and a bowl of ice cream. If I sprained my wrist during gym, I was told to walk it off because Mom was busy. I had learned early that my role in the family wasn't to be cared for, but to be useful when someone else, usually Lucas, needed something. I didn't answer right away. I put my phone face down and went to the fridge for something to eat, only to realize I'd been too busy studying for finals to grocery shop properly. I poured myself a bowl of cereal and sat there in silence. thinking about how every major milestone in my life had somehow been overshadowed by Lucas. My high school graduation? He'd been caught throwing a huge party the night before, so all anyone could talk about was the trouble he'd gotten into. When I got my first job, he totaled his car the same day, so the family group chat lit up with everyone discussing insurance claims instead of congratulating me. Around 9 p.m., my phone buzzed again, a video call from my dad. Against my better judgment, I answered. Dad's face filled the screen, his expression tight and impatient. "Adrian, finally. We've been calling you all day." "I was busy," I said flatly. "Graduating." He didn't even acknowledge it. "Lucas is in trouble. He needs you to come over tonight." "Now." I blinked. "What kind of trouble?" Dad sighed like I was being unreasonable. "His credit card's maxed out, and he can't pay the balance. He was counting on you to help." I stared at him. He was counting on me? I didn't even know about this until 10 seconds ago. "You're good with money," Dad said, as if that explained everything. "You've been working all through school, saving up. Lucas wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious." I felt my jaw tighten. "You skipped my graduation to go skiing, and now you're asking me to bail him out." "It wasn't about skiing," Dad said quickly, but I could see the ski lodge behind him in the video, the wood-paneled walls, the fancy chandelier. Lucas had been stressed, and we thought the trip would help. "You know he's been under pressure lately, right?" I said, my voice cold. "And I guess I haven't been." Dad's expression shifted, that subtle flash of annoyance I'd seen my whole life. The unspoken message, "Stop making this about you." When I hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the blank wall opposite my couch. It wasn't just that they'd missed my graduation. It was the expectation that I would, without hesitation, set aside my own life to clean up after Lucas. It had always been that way. When he failed a class in college, I was roped into doing his assignments just for one semester. When he ran up a tab at a bar, I was guilt-tripped into paying it off because family sticks together. But somehow, family never stuck with me. 2 days later, I got another call, this time from Lucas himself. He didn't bother with hello. "Hey, so, when are you bringing the money over?" "I'm not," I said. There was a pause, then a laugh. "Come on, don't be like that. You've always helped me before." "Yeah," I said slowly. "And you've never once shown up for me. Not for my graduation, not for anything. Why should I help you now?" He scoffed. "Wow, so you're going to hold a grudge over some ceremony? You're being petty." That word, petty, hit harder than it should have. It was the same thing they'd always said whenever I stood up for myself. In their eyes, my boundaries weren't boundaries. They were overreactions. By the end of the week, I was getting texts from every family member I could think of. Aunts, uncles, even my grandmother. All telling me some version of, "Lucas is your brother. You can't just let him fail like this." Or, "Don't throw away family over money." Not one of them mentioned my graduation. Not one. The thing was, I hadn't even told them no because of the money. I had told them no because I was tired. Tired of being the safety net for a man who never learned to land on his own feet. Tired of being invisible until they needed me. And the more they pushed, the more I realized they didn't see me as part of the family in the same way they saw Lucas. I was a resource, a tool. What I didn't know then was that their pressure campaign was just getting started. The texts, the calls, the subtle digs. They were all building towards something much bigger, something they thought they could corner me into. And they had no idea that the more they pushed, the more I was already starting to plan how I'd push back. It wouldn't be long before they gave me the perfect reason. And once they did, there would be no going back. It was a quiet Thursday morning when the real blow landed. I had just finished sending out a few job applications, the kind of positions I'd been dreaming about throughout college, when I got a call from my bank. The woman on the other end was polite but concerned. "Mr. Rivers, I just wanted to confirm a large transfer request we received from your account earlier today." I sat up straighter. "Transfer request? I haven't authorized anything." She read off the details. Nearly $4,800, set to be wired to a joint account in Lucas's name. My stomach dropped. "Cancel it," I said immediately. "That's what I thought," she replied. "It was initiated online from an IP address registered at your parents' home." I didn't need a detective to piece it together. My parents had my old banking login from years ago, back when I was still in high school, and they insisted on keeping an eye on things so I wouldn't overspend. I'd never changed the password because I trusted they'd never use it without my consent. I guess that trust was misplaced. I ended the call, shaking, not just from anger, but from the quiet, bone-deep realization that they'd crossed a line I couldn't ignore. This wasn't asking for help. This wasn't even guilt-tripping. This was theft, plain and simple. And it wasn't even just about the money. It was about the fact that they felt entitled to take from me without asking, because in their eyes, it wasn't really mine to begin with. Before I could even process what to do next, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Lucas. "Thanks for covering it, man. I'll pay you back when I can." A winking emoji followed, like it was some harmless joke between brothers. I didn't reply. My hands were too tight around the phone, knuckles white. I thought back to every moment they'd made me feel small, every time my achievements were sidelined, every time I was told to be the bigger person while Lucas got away with anything. Now it was clear, they didn't just expect me to pick up the pieces when he messed up. They believed I owed it to him. I called my mom. She answered cheerfully, like nothing was wrong. "Adrian, we were just talking about you. You should come by this weekend. Did you authorize a transfer from my account?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. There was a pause, not the pause of someone confused, but the pause of someone figuring out what excuse to use. "Oh, sweetheart, we knew you'd help your brother. He's in a tight spot, and we didn't want to bother you with the details while you were busy with school things." "You stole from me," I said. Her tone hardened instantly. "Don't be dramatic. We're family. It's not stealing when it's for someone you love." Something inside me shifted at those words. For years, I'd let that twisted version of love dictate how I was treated. But in that moment, it hit me. Their definition of love was just a word they used to excuse taking whatever they wanted from me. I hung up before she could say more. The silence in my apartment was so sharp it felt like it had edges. My diploma was still leaning against the wall where I'd left it after graduation, unframed, unopened. I stared at it, and I realized it wasn't just a piece of paper. It was proof. Proof that I'd built something for myself despite them, despite being constantly overlooked, despite being treated like a backup plan for their favorite son. That night, I changed every password I had. Bank accounts, email, everything. And as I did, I thought about the 37 missed calls on graduation day, the way they'd made my milestone about Lucas's ski trip, the entitled assumption that my hard-earned money was theirs for the taking. They had taken the first shot. They had made it clear they weren't going to respect any boundary I set. And I had a feeling they thought I'd just fume quietly and then forgive them, like always. They were wrong. Because this time, they hadn't just hurt me. They'd given me a reason, a perfect reason, to finally stop playing the role they'd assigned me. And in the days ahead, that reason was going to be the fuel for something they wouldn't see coming. What I didn't know yet was how far they were willing to push me before I acted. But I was about to find out. The next couple of weeks felt like moving through heavy fog. I still went through the motions, sending out job applications, making it to a few interviews, but my mind was elsewhere. Every time I opened my banking app, I half expected to see something else missing. I kept my phone on silent because I couldn't stand the constant buzzing from family members, each of them with their own friendly reminders about how I should let it go for the sake of family peace. The narrative they were pushing was predictable. Lucas was stressed, Lucas was struggling, Lucas didn't mean any harm. Somehow, I was the cold one for making a scene about it. The theft had been reframed as a misunderstanding, and my refusal to cave was holding a grudge. It was surreal. I wanted to scream every time someone told me I was being unfair, but I didn't. I didn't give them the satisfaction of hearing my frustration. Instead, I pulled back. I stopped going to Sunday dinners. I stopped answering calls unless they came from numbers I didn't recognize, in case it was a job opportunity. I stopped checking the family group chat entirely. When I finally opened it one night out of morbid curiosity, I saw a string of photos from the ski trip, Lucas posing with his friends, champagne in hand. There were laughing emojis and captions about living life to the fullest. My graduation? Not a single photo, not a single word. That hit harder than I wanted to admit. I tried for years to convince myself that if I just worked hard enough, if I achieved enough, they'd see me differently. That they'd be proud in the same way they were proud of Lucas. But the truth was right there in front of me. I could cure a disease, and they'd still find a way to make it about him. My finances were tight now. Graduation had already drained most of my savings, application fees, rent, basic living costs. And while the bank had canceled the transfer before it went through, there had still been processing fees and a hold on my account for days. I had to scrape by with what I had left. I skipped meals more than I wanted to admit. My apartment felt colder, emptier. It was the first time in years I felt truly alone, not just without company, but without the illusion of support. The worst part? My degree should have been opening doors, but without any real connections or family backing, I was just another resume in a pile. Every rejection email was another reminder that I was on my own now. That if I fell, there was no one who'd catch me, unless catching me meant taking something from me. But here's the thing. In that quiet, in that isolation, a part of me started to wake up. I began keeping a small notebook by my bed, jotting down everything that had happened since graduation. Every call, every text, every piece of manipulation. I started looking back, writing down old incidents too, moments I'd brushed off at the time. When I read it all together, it was like looking at a long, slow-moving train wreck. Patterns I'd ignored before were glaringly obvious now. I wasn't sure yet what I was going to do with it, but I knew I was done reacting on impulse. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't plead. I wouldn't try to make them see my side. That had never worked, and it never would. Instead, I was going to wait. Watch. Let them keep showing me who they were. And when the time came, I'd have more than just the will to stand up for myself. I'd have a plan. The problem was, they weren't done with me yet. And before I could put that plan into motion, they were going to push me further than I'd ever thought possible. Far enough that I'd have no choice but to act. The shift started small, almost unnoticeable at first. I landed a part-time research assistant job at a local firm. It didn't pay much, but it gave me enough breathing room to cover rent without dipping into the last of my savings. More importantly, it was a foot in the door, a place where my skills actually mattered and my work wasn't constantly overshadowed by someone else's charm. The first time my supervisor, Karen, complimented my report writing skills in front of the whole team, I didn't even know how to react. I wasn't used to public recognition that wasn't immediately undercut by a "but Lucas" sentence. Here, no one compared me to a golden boy. No one minimized what I'd done. I showed up, worked hard, and people noticed. It was strange and intoxicating in its own quiet way. Within 2 months, that part-time role became full-time. I was suddenly making enough to not only keep my bills paid, but to start rebuilding my savings. I upgraded my wardrobe with a few professional outfits. I started eating better, getting back into shape, and even joined a coworker for early morning runs in the park. For the first time in a long time, I woke up each day feeling like my life was actually moving forward, without my family's approval, without their involvement at all. The social shift came next. One of my colleagues, Derek, invited me to a networking event for young professionals. I almost didn't go. The idea of networking made me think of fake smiles and shallow conversations. But I went anyway. And to my surprise, I met people who were genuinely interested in what I did and what I was working toward. Over the following weeks, I built connections, swapped contact info, and even started attending industry mixers. It wasn't overnight success, but it was steady, undeniable progress. And the best part? My family had no idea. I didn't post about it. I didn't send updates. I learned to love the silence. Every accomplishment felt like a card I was keeping face down on the table, waiting for the right time to flip it over. Financially, I started to pull ahead. By month 4, I'd paid off the small debt I'd carried from my last semester of school. By month 6, I had a growing emergency fund. Around that same time, Karen recommended me for a side consulting gig with a startup. It was only a few hours a week, but the pay was more than generous, and it let me stretch skills I hadn't touched since my senior thesis. That gig snowballed into another one, and before long, I was making more on the side than I had at my original full-time job. I knew the version of me they were used to, the quiet helper, the one who said yes because it was easier than fighting, would have never reached this point. This was new territory. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building leverage. And still, I kept my cards close. When my mom called to ask if I was doing okay financially, I gave her the most generic answer possible. I'm fine. No details, no openings for them to gauge how much they could take. The less they knew, the less they could target. But Lucas couldn't help himself. He started sending me casual messages again. "Hey man, how's work? Got any plans for the weekend?" I recognized it for what it was, testing the waters. He'd done it before after our fights, slowly sliding back into my life until he could ask for something. This time, I didn't bite. I gave short, polite answers. Nothing more. And yet, I could feel something brewing. Call it instinct. Call it the years of watching how my family operated. The tone of their rare messages had shifted. Polite, even warm, in a way that felt rehearsed. I didn't know exactly what they wanted yet, but I could guess. Money, favors, something that benefited Lucas at my expense. What they didn't realize was that they weren't dealing with the same person anymore. I wasn't the broke, dependent college student they could corner with guilt trips. I had resources. I had connections. And for the first time in my life, I had the means to say no and make it stick. Still, I didn't move first. I knew that if I waited, they'd hand me the perfect opening. They always did. And when that moment came, I wouldn't just say no. I'd make it clear, in a way they couldn't ignore, that the old version of me was gone for good. The moment I was waiting for was closer than I thought. And when it arrived, it would be bigger and uglier than anything I'd imagined. It happened on a rainy Tuesday evening, 6 months after my graduation. I was just leaving the office when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end introduced himself as Mr. Carter, a senior partner at a mid-sized investment firm. "Adrian, I've heard good things about you," he said, his tone all business. "Karen speaks highly of your work, and Derek mentioned you're excellent with financial structuring. We could use someone like you for a project we're taking on." I'd learned to keep my excitement under wraps, so I listened carefully. The project turned out to be a full-scale portfolio restructuring for a local chain of boutique hotels. It wasn't just a job, it was a chance to work directly with high-net-worth clients, to get my name in rooms I'd never even known existed a year ago. The fee they offered for my role was more than my monthly salary at my regular job. I said yes. Over the next several weeks, I threw myself into the work. It was demanding, late nights, endless spreadsheets, constant strategy calls, but I was in my element. My input started to shape decisions. The chain's owner, a sharp but personable man named Michael Reeves, took notice. "You're not just good with numbers," he told me one night over dinner with the project team. "You understand how people think." That's rare. I didn't know it then, but Michael would end up being one of the most valuable connections I'd ever make. He had deep ties to the local business community and was well respected in circles my family couldn't even dream of entering. While all this was happening, I was also gathering information, not because I was actively planning revenge yet, but because old habits die hard. I'd been keeping that notebook of mine updated. Every petty comment from my family, every manipulation attempt, every subtle probe into my finances. But now I had something more. Through casual conversations with family friends at networking events, it's amazing what people will share over a glass of wine. I learned that Lucas had been trying, and failing, to get backing for a business venture. Apparently, he'd pitched a half-baked idea for a luxury sports bar to several investors, but no one was willing to touch it. One comment stuck with me. "If he can't get someone to co-sign a loan soon, he's sunk. Your parents are really stressed about it." I tucked that away in the back of my mind. I knew my family well enough to see the pattern forming. At some point, they'd try to present this sports bar as a family opportunity, spinning it as a chance for me to support my brother's future. They'd push hard, frame it as an investment, maybe even try to guilt me by saying it would unite the family. And they'd assume I didn't know how bad Lucas's situation really was. Meanwhile, my own position kept improving. When the hotel project wrapped, Michael pulled me aside. "You ever thought about starting your own consulting business? You've got the skills, and I've got contacts who'd hire you tomorrow." The idea lit something in me. Within a month, I'd filed the paperwork for my own small firm. It was still just me and a laptop in my apartment, but I had my first 2 clients before I even finished setting up the website. By the end of that quarter, I'd made more than I'd earned in an entire year at my first job. I didn't brag. I didn't even hint at it to my family. I let them think I was still working a modest office job, scraping by. Every time Mom asked, "How's work?" I'd give a vague, "busy, but good," and change the subject. The less they knew, the better. But privately, I was building something that gave me real power. Not just money, but options. Options to say no without fear. Options to walk away without losing anything. Options to hit back if they crossed me again. And sure enough, that moment arrived one Sunday afternoon when I got a family dinner invite out of the blue. No reason given, just "we'd love to see you." My gut told me this wasn't about catching up. This was the setup. I already suspected what was coming. What I didn't know yet was just how far they were willing to go to try and rope me in, or how perfectly their plan was going to set the stage for mine. I walked into my parents' house on that Sunday evening with the kind of calm you only get when you already know the ending to the story. The smell of Mom's roast chicken drifted from the kitchen, but the atmosphere in the living room was stiff, too rehearsed. Dad was sitting in his armchair, hands folded like he was hosting a board meeting. Lucas was on the couch, leaning back casually, but his eyes were just a little too bright. After the usual hollow greetings, Mom poured me a glass of water and said, "We're so glad you could make it. There's something exciting we want to talk about, a family opportunity." I almost smiled. There it was. Lucas launched into his pitch, complete with printed brochures and a laptop presentation. He talked about the sports bar of the future, about high-end decor and signature cocktails, about exclusive partnerships with local breweries. He used phrases like ground floor opportunity and guaranteed returns. I listened, nodded occasionally, and didn't interrupt. When he finally finished, Mom leaned in with that expectant smile. "We've already got interest from a few investors, but we'd love to keep it in the family. We thought you could come in as a primary backer. It'd be such a great way to bond." "Really?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "And how much are we talking about?" Lucas didn't flinch. $150,000 to start. But you'd own 30%. Huge upside, man. I set my glass down and leaned forward slightly. "That's a big ask. So, just out of curiosity, have you told all your potential investors about the loan rejections?" The room went still. Lucas's smile faltered. "What?" "I mean, the ones from First State Bank, Harborview Capital, and Westline Financial. The three that turned you down because your projections didn't add up." I kept my voice even, but I didn't miss the way Mom's eyes darted toward Dad. I just wouldn't want anyone to feel like they weren't getting the full picture. Lucas's jaw tightened. "I don't know where you're getting your—" I cut him off with a shrug. "People talk, especially in business circles. And I happen to run in a few now." Dad tried to salvage the moment. "Adrian, this is your brother's dream. You're in a good position now. You could really help." That was my cue. I pulled a folder from my bag and slid it onto the coffee table. Inside was a polished, bound copy of my firm's portfolio, clients, contracts, revenue projections. All legitimate, all impressive. "You're right," I said. "I am in a good position. Good enough to know this isn't an investment. It's a bailout." Lucas's face went red. Mom's mouth opened, then closed again. "And here's the thing," I continued, my tone still calm. "I don't invest in people who steal from me. And before you say it wasn't stealing, let me remind you, I spoke to the bank. I know exactly who tried to pull money from my account after graduation. That landed like a stone in a pond. No one moved." I stood, tucking the folder back into my bag. "From now on, I'm done being your safety net. I'm not your investor, your ATM, or your fallback plan. Whatever hole you've dug, you can climb out of it yourselves." I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back just long enough to twist the knife. "Oh, and Michael Reeves? He's a friend now. His company owns 3 of the city's busiest bars. When your pitch crosses his desk, and it will, you can guess how that'll go." Lucas didn't say a word. Mom looked like she wanted to, but Dad's hand on her arm kept her silent. I left without another word, the sound of the rain outside somehow lighter than when I'd arrived. They'd come expecting the same old Adrian, the one they could pressure into giving in. Instead, they'd gotten the version they'd spent years creating without realizing it, the one who'd learned exactly how to beat them at their own game. What I didn't see, not until later, was just how badly that single evening would unravel things for them. The fallout began faster than I'd expected. 2 weeks after that dinner, I got a text from an old neighbor. "Hey, just saw your brother at the bank. Looked furious. Something happened." That same day, I received an email from Michael Reeves confirming my suspicion. Lucas had, indeed, sent him the sports bar proposal. Michael hadn't just declined. He'd forwarded it to a few other prominent investors in the city with a short, professional note. "Not financially sound. Proceed with caution." Within days, Lucas's ground floor opportunity was dead in the water. Word travels quickly in tight business networks, and his name became synonymous with overpromising and underdelivering. Every lead dried up. No bank would take his calls. No investor wanted a meeting. That alone would have been enough, but my parents' reaction sealed it. Mom called me late one night, her voice tight. "Do you know what you've done? Your brother's future is ruined. We had to take out a line of credit on the house to cover his debts." I kept my voice even. "I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped protecting him from the consequences of his own choices. There was silence on the line. I could almost hear her swallowing back whatever she wanted to say. When she finally spoke, it was softer, but colder. "You've changed." "Yes," I said. "I have." And I hung up. Over the next month, I kept my distance. My consulting firm continued to grow, and I moved into a larger apartment downtown, one with a skyline view I'd dreamed about since my first year of college. The few mutual friends I still shared with my family began to quietly acknowledge what I'd always known. The golden boy shine had worn off, and the cracks were showing. Lucas had picked fights with several of them after his failed business, blaming the market, bad timing, and even me. But no one was buying it. The last time I saw him was by accident. I was meeting a client for lunch, and Lucas walked past the restaurant. He noticed me through the window, slowed for a moment, and then kept walking. No smile, no wave. Just a man who'd finally realized the person he used to lean on was gone for good. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilt. I felt free, because they had taught me, in their own way, the most valuable lesson I'd ever learn. When you stop letting people treat you like a safety net, you find out very quickly who's capable of standing on their own.